She was only 2 years old, placed in a foster home for love and protection. But instead of safety, Viola Vanclief was met with cruelty, silence, and the failure of an entire system. Her life ended at the hands of those who were supposed to care for her, and because of a broken system that ignored every warning sign. This is not just the story of one failed foster mother. It's the story of how every safeguard created to protect a child completely collapsed. Now, let me walk you through the full case in detail. Foster mother who fatally beat 2-year-old gets 25 to life by Matt Stevens and Garrett Thurolf. Latimes.com February 21, 2014. A foster mother convicted of second-degree murder in the beating death of a 2-year-old girl was sentenced Friday to 25 years to life in state prison. Kiana Barker, 34, who had been trying to adopt Viola Vanclief in 2010, severely beat the toddler and later called 911 to report that the girl had stopped breathing, prosecutors allege. In October, a jury found Barker guilty of second-degree murder, assault on a child causing death, and child abuse. The case was the latest in a years-long series of problems for United Care, a nonprofit foster agency that contracted with Los Angeles County at the time of Viola's death and had placed the girl with Barker. After the child's death, the county terminated its contract with United Care. Witnesses said that Baker burst into Viola's room after hours of heavy drinking and beat her. When Barker was pulled away, the little girl was on the floor, struggling to breathe, the witness said. Though doctors at a hospital attempted to revive the girl, prosecutors said the child was dead on arrival. The girl had suffered extensive blunt force trauma, the district attorney's office said in a statement. A motion filed with the court at sentencing said the trauma was caused by multiple repeated blows by an adult, exerting maximum force. Ultimately, it was determined that the child, who was placed in child care because her biological mother was a crack addict and prostitute, had died from massive bleeding in her chest cavity, prosecutors said. Authorities said that Barker eventually told investigators that Viola had become jammed in a bed frame, and that she might have accidentally hit the girl with a hammer as she tried to free her. The child's death focused attention on the Department of Children and Family Services, whose officials could not initially explain how the child came into the care of Barker and her then-boyfriend, James Julian. Shortly after Viola's death, the Times reported that Barker had been the subject of 5 previous child abuse complaints, including one substantiated allegation that she had severely neglected her own biological child in 2002. Julian had been convicted in 1992 of armed robbery, a fact that should have disqualified him from living in a home certified for foster care. Los Angeles County supervisors later voted to develop an investigations unit and subsequently terminated their relationship with United Care. In December, the Times also reported that at least 4 children in Los Angeles County had died as a result of abuse or neglect over the past 5 years in homes overseen by private agencies, such as United Care. Responding to the report, Los Angeles County officials launched a review of the criminal clearance process for foster parents selected by private agencies. Viola's remains have been buried in an unmarked grave in Carson. Foster mother sentenced in tragic case involving toddler's injuries by Jill Cowan. Adapted for documentary narrative October 18, 2013. A tragic case reached its legal conclusion today as a foster mother was found responsible for the passing of a young child in her care. The jury's verdict confirmed that Kiana Barker, 33, was guilty of multiple charges connected to the disturbing events of 2010, when 2-year-old Viola Vanclief lost her life while living under Barker's supervision. Barker now faces a potential sentence ranging from 25 years to life behind bars. The charges include the most serious category of harm inflicted upon a child, leading to fatal consequences, as well as previous instances of child mistreatment. This is a day where accountability finally caught up. said Deputy District Attorney Pat Cooch, moments after the verdict was announced at the Los Angeles County Superior Court. This case was yet another troubling chapter in the long record of issues surrounding United Care, a foster care agency that once held a contract with the county. It was this agency that placed little Viola in Barker's household. The contract was later terminated after multiple failures came to light. Prosecutors claimed that on March 3, 2010, Barker struck Viola with a belt during an episode of intense frustration. A day later, Barker dialed emergency services, claiming the toddler had suddenly stopped breathing. Despite doctors doing all they could at the hospital, the child could not be revived. At one point during the investigation, Barker told authorities that Viola had become trapped in a piece of furniture and that she might have accidentally hit the child while attempting to rescue her, even suggesting she had used a household tool in the process. During the closing arguments, Prosecutor Cooch shared highly emotional evidence, images from the hospital showing the child's condition. The scene was deeply distressing. "It's unthinkable," Cooch told the courtroom. "But the facts, the proof, they leave no room for doubt." She went on to describe Barker as someone with a pattern of violent behavior, claiming she had previously used aggressive discipline against her biological daughter as well. In Viola's case, the level of force was said to be extreme, leading to critical injuries inside the chest area. The prosecution argued that there was no one else in the home at the time who could have caused the final act that led to the toddler's passing. However, the defense presented a different story. Barker's attorney, Robert Haberer, told the court that blame should actually be placed on Barker's then-boyfriend, James Julian. Julian had a prior record and later accepted a plea deal for helping cover up what had happened. He was sentenced to 3 years for his involvement. Interestingly, Barker and Julian got married just weeks after Viola's death, a fact that raised further suspicion for some. According to Haberer, Barker initially gave false information to protect Julian, denying he was even in the house that day. That, he said, was her biggest mistake, and it cost her dearly. The defense added that Barker had genuine intentions toward the child and had even begun the process to adopt her, challenging the idea that her motivations were financial. Still, many believe that the system failed Viola on multiple levels. How someone with past issues, including exposure to a convicted felon, was allowed to foster a child remains a deeply troubling question for the Department of Children and Family Services. The courtroom may now be quiet, but this case has left echoes far beyond its walls, a reminder of the vulnerability of children and the heavy responsibility placed on those meant to protect them. Foster mother and partner rearrested after renewed probe into toddler's tragic passing by Garrett Thurolf. Adapted for narrative use July 21, 2010, several months after the heartbreaking loss of a 2-year-old foster child in South Los Angeles. Law enforcement officials have once again taken legal action against the individuals suspected to be involved. The foster mother, Kiana Barker, and her partner, James Julian, were both rearrested after a deeper investigation into the hours leading up to the child's untimely end. The move came after Los Angeles Police Department detectives carried out an extensive reconstruction of the events that occurred before March 4, the day young Viola Vanclief lost her life. Investigators meticulously worked through witness accounts, location details, and expert assessments to piece together a clearer timeline. On July 15, Barker, age 30, was formally taken into custody once again. According to the criminal complaint, she now faces charges related to extreme mistreatment of a minor, attempting to obstruct a witness, and causing a fatal outcome through negligence and abuse. Her bail was set at $1.1 million. Just 2 days later, her boyfriend, 38-year-old James Julian, turned himself in to authorities. Court records show he is accused of assisting after the incident and interfering with legal processes. His bail was set even higher, at $1.6 million. Both individuals had previously come under scrutiny immediately after Viola's passing in early March. At that time, Barker provided an explanation to investigators, claiming that the toddler had become stuck in a piece of furniture and may have been unintentionally struck with a tool during a rescue attempt. However, officials noted that no immediate help was sought for the child after the incident, which raised serious concerns. Barker and Julian were first arrested on March 9, shortly after the event, under suspicion of involvement. However, they were released within 48 hours when no official charges were brought forward. Authorities at that point stated that their inquiry was ongoing. From that moment onward, LAPD detectives worked with medical and forensic specialists to analyze the child's injuries. Through rigorous analysis and interviews, they narrowed down a window of time during which the incident likely occurred. According to LT. Vincent Neglia from the Juvenile Division, assembling this timeline proved exceptionally complex due to conflicting information and limited access to immediate evidence. It's especially troubling that Barker was nearing final approval from the Department of Children and Family Services to legally adopt Viola, despite her troubling background. Confidential documents later revealed that Barker had been the subject of 5 past complaints involving mistreatment of minors. One particularly serious report from 2002 involved her own biological child, who allegedly experienced neglect under her care. James Julian, also known by the nickname Big Bird, had his own concerning history. In 1992, he was found guilty of a serious robbery charge. Under California's foster care regulations, individuals with such records should have been automatically barred from residing in homes with foster children, let alone actively participating in their care. This deeply disturbing case prompted Los Angeles County to cancel its agreement with United Care, the private agency responsible for approving Barker's home as a foster environment. At the time of review, United Care was overseeing 88 homes and providing placement for over 200 foster children. However, its record was already problematic. Multiple caregivers under United Care's umbrella had been reported in past years for harsh and inappropriate discipline, including choking, physical aggression, and the use of belts. These incidents alone should have triggered immediate concern and regulatory action. Beyond caregiving failures, financial mismanagement also came to light. A 2007 audit revealed that United Care had received nearly $4 million in taxpayer-funded payments to support foster children, yet over $270,000 of those expenses were deemed questionable. That amount was ordered to be repaid, but much of the money reportedly remains unreturned. Viola's case remains one of the most heartbreaking reminders of the vulnerability of children in foster care and the importance of strict oversight, both at the agency and county levels. It exposed cracks not only in individual accountability, but also in the systems meant to protect children like her. Foster approval questioned as past reports emerge in Toddler's Tragic Case by Garrett Thurolf. Adapted for documentary narrative March 18, 2010. The foster care system is once again under intense scrutiny after it was revealed that the South Los Angeles caregiver being investigated in the untimely passing of 2-year-old Viola Vanclief had a documented history of serious complaints. According to confidential records, Kiana Barker had previously been named in 5 separate reports related to mistreatment of children, including one confirmed instance of severe neglect involving her own child back in 2002. These troubling findings have prompted deeper questions. How did someone with this kind of background receive state approval to foster a child? And why weren't the earlier warning signs enough to raise alarms? Compounding the concern is the revelation that Barker's partner, James Julian, had a serious criminal history, one that, under California's regulations, should have barred him from residing in a foster-approved home. Viola's placement in Barker's home was supposed to offer her stability and safety. Born in 2007, the little girl had already faced a difficult start in life. Her biological mother suffered from a severe mental health condition and was reportedly unable to care for the child while off medication. According to official records, Viola was initially removed from her mother's custody shortly after birth and later returned in an attempt to support family reunification. However, within months, social workers discovered renewed concerns. The mother was still not taking medication, had reportedly used illegal substances, and had engaged in violent behavior toward another individual. These red flags ultimately led the county to begin court proceedings to remove parental rights permanently. After this, Viola was placed in Barker's home, a decision now being heavily re-examined. Authorities say that on March 4, tragedy struck. Barker told investigators that Viola had gotten stuck in a bed frame and was accidentally injured during a rescue attempt involving a household object. Multiple bruises were found on the child, and medical personnel later determined the cause of passing to be due to significant physical trauma. Both Barker and Julian were arrested in the days following the event, though they were released pending further investigation. Prosecutors requested more detailed input from police and the county coroner before proceeding. As days turned into weeks, child welfare officials still couldn't explain why Barker's troubling past didn't prevent her from receiving a foster care license. We're still reviewing who had the responsibility to assess her history and why the proper follow-up didn't occur, said Trish Plone, then director of the Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services. Even at the state level, there appeared to be serious gaps in oversight. Jeff Huritsuka, who led the California Community Care Licensing Division, acknowledged that his department wasn't sure whether the earlier 2002 neglect finding had been entered properly into the statewide system used to vet foster care applicants. If the information had been missed or omitted, it may explain how Barker was able to get licensed in 2005 and again in 2009. We're actively gathering more facts to determine what happened, added state spokesperson Lizalda Lopez. Family members, particularly Viola's older sister Sonia Vanclief, expressed deep frustration and sorrow. Viola should have never been taken from her mom, Sonia said from her home in Columbus, Ohio. She was just a baby, helpless, and they were supposed to protect her. The system let her down. Sonia herself had spent time in foster care as a child and described the county's handling of the case as negligent and careless. Documents show that county staff first engaged with Viola's case shortly after birth, and though efforts were made to help the biological mother care for her, ongoing issues led to permanent removal. Barker, at the time already a mother of two, was given placement, despite a track record that should have raised red flags. Notably, the 2002 confirmed case of neglect should have added Barker's name to a state-monitored database designed to block unfit individuals from working in childcare roles. Yet she passed multiple licensing phases without issue. In the following years, Barker continued to draw concern. Reports from 2005 to 2008 included claims of emotional mistreatment, lack of supervision, and even serious accusations of misconduct. Many of the charges were eventually labeled as inconclusive or unfounded. But under California law, even inconclusive complaints can impact someone's eligibility to foster children, especially when repeated. In 2008, for example, one complaint alleged that Barker had neglected two foster children. Another month brought a more severe accusation of inappropriate behavior toward minors. While none of these were confirmed beyond doubt, the sheer volume of reports should have triggered deeper evaluation. Adding to the tragedy, it appears Julian, also known by the nickname Big Bird, was never properly flagged by county workers. Despite living with Barker for 3 years, his criminal history, including a 1992 conviction for a serious robbery offense, went undetected by officials. This alone should have disqualified the entire household from participating in foster care programs. Now, both Barker and Julian remain under investigation, and Viola's case stands as a grim reminder of what happens when oversight fails. The silent cries of Viola Vanclief, a system's tragic failure in South Los Angeles, a heartbreaking tragedy unfolded, one that shook the very foundation of the foster care system. It was the story of little Viola Vanclief, a 2-year-old girl placed in the care of people meant to protect her. Instead, her life ended under disturbing circumstances, prompting public outrage and a renewed scrutiny of oversight agencies. On March 4, 2010, the child was found unresponsive. Official reports would later reveal that she had suffered injuries from what was initially described as a household accident. The foster mother, Kiana Barker, told authorities that the toddler had become stuck in a bed frame, and in an attempt to free her, a heavy object, a tool, was accidentally involved. But investigators and medical experts soon began to question this version of events. The case quickly drew attention from law enforcement and the Department of Children and Family Services. Kiana Barker, 30, and her partner, James Julian, 38, were taken into custody a few days after the incident. Initially held on suspicion of criminal involvement in Viola's passing, they were released 2 days later without charges. Authorities insisted the case was still being investigated, but the release sparked confusion and concern in the community. This wasn't the first time the agency involved, United Care Inc., had been under scrutiny. The nonprofit, which had been tasked with finding safe homes for vulnerable children, had a troubling history. Records showed multiple prior incidents where children in their care had been harmed or neglected. Caregivers had allegedly used physical discipline that crossed all ethical lines, and in 2007, a child had tragically drowned during an unsupervised swimming session. That case alone should have prompted sweeping reforms. But it didn't. United Care managed over 80 homes and was responsible for the well-being of more than 200 foster children. Despite multiple violations and citations, the agency continued operating, receiving millions in taxpayer funding. A 2007 audit revealed alarming financial discrepancies. Over $270,000 in expenditures were flagged as questionable. While the agency was ordered to repay the amount, much of it remained uncollected for years. Back in South LA, the home where Viola had been living was no longer under United Care's approval. After the incident, the county took steps to suspend Barker's foster parent certification. A sign from regulators was placed outside her residence, stating that the child care license had been revoked pending further investigation. Neighbors were stunned. To them, Barker appeared to be a quiet woman with a spiritual disposition. According to her grandmother, who lived next door, Barker was hysterical the day Viola stopped breathing. She had reportedly screamed for help, saying the child wasn't responding. Her partner, Julian, attempted CPR while emergency services were contacted. However, there was no mention at the time about any tool or accident involving household items. Later reports painted a very different picture. The medical examiner noted multiple bruises on Viola's small body. While Barker continued to claim it was an accident, the forensic evidence told a more complex story. Law enforcement began to piece together the timeline, and inconsistencies in statements became harder to ignore. To make matters worse, James Julian had a criminal record. He had been previously convicted of armed robbery involving a weapon back in 1998, a fact that should have disqualified him from living in a home with foster children under California regulations. Yet somehow, the background checks had failed to flag this critical red flag, and that failure may have cost a young girl her life. The Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services responded with silence at first. Later, Director Trish Ploen issued a short statement expressing deep sorrow, calling the case a devastating tragedy. However, behind the scenes, the department was already facing significant pressure. Over the previous 2 years, more than 30 child fatalities had occurred in homes under the department's supervision. The majority were children living with their biological families, but a few, like Viola, were in foster care. Kiana Barker's past also raised eyebrows. She had previously operated a small child care business out of her home, though she eventually stopped due to low demand. She had 2 biological children of her own and had been certified as a foster parent just a year before Viola's death. Despite 5 previous child welfare complaints filed against her, including one case involving serious neglect, she was approved to care for foster children. The approval process for foster parents in Los Angeles County was supposed to be thorough, involving background checks, home inspections, and interviews. But in Barker's case, it appeared that crucial warnings were overlooked, and with Julian's presence in the home, despite his prior conviction, the system failed once again. Even community members who had known Barker personally were in disbelief. A family friend described her as a kind and spiritually grounded individual. He claimed he had never witnessed her lose her temper or behave aggressively toward children. Still, no one could fully explain what had happened that day. As the investigation continued, United Care was stripped of its ability to take in new placements. Social workers tied to the case were placed on desk duty. The agency's leadership issued a public statement expressing condolences but refrained from commenting further, citing the ongoing investigation. In hindsight, this was not just a case of personal failure, it was institutional negligence. Viola Vanclief deserved safety, love, and protection, but instead, she was placed in a situation where known risk factors were ignored, where oversight was lax, and where money often outweighed child welfare. What happened to Viola was not only avoidable, it was foretold in the records, reports, and ignored warnings that preceded her final days. The system has promised reform in the wake of her case, but for many, that promise came too late.